but definitely to the left of you, we have the Admiral, Bill Stubblefield. Good morning, Bill.
Yes, I am. And to the left of me.
And absolutely to the left of you is John Doyle. Welcome, John.
Glad to be here.
Former delegate.
Yeah, you have it arranged so that it starts with you on the far right and then moves to the near right.
I'm not sure that's true.
We also,
okay. Well, all right.
On the telephone, we also have Joe Ferretti, and I don't know that Joe's to the left of you, John.
No, he's not. Joe would probably be about where the Admiral is, I would think.
Yeah.
I think Joe's a little bit to the left of me, but we're close.
Joe, are you there?
Yes, I am here, and if I'm with the Admiral, I feel that that's a great place to be.
You're a good man. I had some hard questions for you today, Joe, and I'll give them to somebody else.
Welcome.
I just wondered if Mike Height is familiar with the story of Wally Pipp. Mike, are you familiar with Wally Pipp?
No, but please enlighten us.
Well, I'm sure Bill and John Doyle probably know this story.
I've never heard of Wally Pipp.
Oh, really? Okay, well, back in the 20s, Wally Pipp was a first baseman for the Yankees, and he had a terrible headache. Called the manager and said, hey, I'm not going to show up at the ballpark today. I don't think I can play. I've got a migraine headache. So the replacement for Wally Pipp that day was a first baseman, a young, strapping man named Lou Gehrig. Lou Gehrig then continued to play for the Yankees, never came out of the lineup for almost 2,000 games. So when somebody replaces a person who's considered irreplaceable, like a Rob Mario, oftentimes the name of Wally Pipp is brought up as an example of why maybe you shouldn't miss work.
I don't think Rob has anything to worry about.
But by the same token, Walter Pitt never met the Badger.
Well, that's true. However, I am no Lou Gehrig, that's for sure. All right, Joe, lead us off.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Well, look, I want to talk about public health this morning. And in that context, I'm going to take us back to 1974. At the time, New York City was in a terrible fiscal crisis. They ran out of money. And no public or private lenders would help the city out. Their credit markets had dried up. The federal government gave them a stiff arm when New York City said, look, we may have to declare bankruptcy. Well, the city leaders got together and they decided, well, the way we're going to have to deal with this is we're going to have to cut the budget. So they went to their discretionary part of their budget and really focused in on health. They cut their health department budget by 20%. The city had a Department of Health agency, and they were cut 20%. 28% of the people working in that agency were furloughed. So what happened in the late years after these tremendous cuts to public health? Well, the tuberculosis rates in the New York City went up for the next 15 years after a century of decline. HIV and AIDS, New York City became the ground zero for HIV and AIDS. And if you grew up during that time, and I was a young teenager then, I remember young men dying in the streets, dying alone in their apartments. It was horrible. And the treatment centers, the clinics that were in place had all been shuttered because of these budget cuts. And there was no treatment for these individuals suffering from those afflictions. Drug use and dependency skyrocketed in New York City. The methadone clinics closed down. People, again, were dying in the streets with needles in their arms because the health people, the health workers were not there to assist. So the moral of this story is that you don't mess with public health. While New York City, and a study by the American Public Health Association revealed this, while New York City saved themselves $10 billion with these budget cuts over a span of a decade, the estimates are that the city incurred costs of anywhere from $90 to $150 billion in deaths, lost productivity, unpaid for treatment that all these people needed. It was a mess in New York City. So I think that's a lesson why you don't mess with public health. Now, I bring up this example because we are messing with public health in the state of West Virginia. We have a governor who issued an executive order allowing people to opt out of the MMR vaccinations that are mandatory by law in schools in West Virginia. We now have an executive order that contravenes that law. And the State Board of Education is involved in a lawsuit that the governor is fighting, trying to claim, hey, we want to follow the will of the legislature here. This is the law. Kids have to be vaccinated before they come to school. The governor wants to argue and is fighting this in the courts that people, parents, and their children should be able to opt out. And he's doing this in the face of a measles outbreak in the country. We have the highest number of cases of measles in the United States in the last 30 years. In the year 2000, measles was considered eradicated in this country. It no longer is. Just in the state of Texas, there's been over 100 hospitalizations and 2 child deaths due to measles. And in 30 states, vaccination rates for MMR are going down. So the crisis is at the doorstep. It's coming like it came for New York City in the 1970s. So my question this morning is, with the governor wanting to buck the legislature and go against state law, what is the role of the legislature here going forward? Do we expect them to fight, or will they succumb to the executive power and actually pass a law next session that is going to allow what is a hallmark of West Virginia, the vaccination rates? They're going to allow that to go by the wayside with some law that allows opt-outs for parents and children. That's my question this morning.
Well, I'll lead us off and just say that I have said on this show many times and for a long time that I believe Congress at the federal level and the legislature at the state level have abdicated their authority for a long time, and that executive powers, whether it be at the federal level or state level, have increased over the past decade, I would say 50 years anyway, to a great deal, where we have executives making these decisions way more often than they should be. Having said that, I think the legislature did take this up. They did come to a consensus and decided not to have the vaccines eliminated. Will it be a point of contention next year? I think so. I think they'll bring it up again. But should the executives have some power to make these decisions? Yes, but I don't know about this to this degree. To your point about healthcare as a whole in New York City, one could argue that we're not messing with healthcare as much as maybe one administration went too far with the expansion of Medicaid and healthcare, and that this administration and maybe even this state is trying to right-size it. And I'll leave it at that and move on to John Gilstrap.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is an interesting issue for me because I've straddled both sides of the fence. On the one hand, sticking a needle in my arm is certainly an invasion of my space and of my privacy, and to do it without, I mean, you can't take a blood sample without having a warrant, right? So to insist that my children get vaccinated, and instinctively, my reaction is no, that's wrong. But then we also live in a community, right? And there is some responsibility to our neighbors. Measles was almost eradicated. Now, the highest rate, I'm not making excuses here, the case rate right now is 1,288 cases of measles among 330 million people. So while it is the highest rate in 33 years, it's still a manageable rate. I think it's irresponsible to expose children to diseases that they needn't have. So I'm a supporter of the of requiring vaccinations for kids before they go to school. I think it's the right thing to do. Religious exemptions and what have you, I don't know. I can't speak to that. What I found shocking was how divisive this issue was in the last House session. That broke up friendships and got people removed from from good standing with their fellow delegates. To me, it's like picking a fight that needn't be picked. Let's take the W and say we've eliminated measles and run with that.
Bill.
Yeah. Joe's question, I think, harkens on the issue of this triangle, the relative power between the executive branch, judiciary branch, and the legislators. I would argue the legislators did weigh in on this vaccination issue last session by refusing to pass the law that overturned a law that's been on the books for several years. The legislators said there would be no religious exemptions for vaccinations. The governor's trying to push that overturn. The legislators said, no, we're happy with what we had before. So the legislators did weigh in. So now, and what more can the legislators do now? I'm not sure they can do anything. They've done within what we expected of them. Now the issue becomes a judicial issue. The governor, I think, is pushing this because he's doing a lot of things. He's playing to his base, which is a fairly small 36, 37, 38% of the voters, but he's playing very strong to his base, and this is something that resonates with his base. Will the executive order hold over a statute by the legislators? This is what the courts will determine.
John.
If I might be allowed to plug some of my writing, I've got an op-ed in yesterday's Spirit of Jefferson about this very topic. It's broader.
I can't see any reason why not. Go right ahead.
It's broader. It's about this question that this of the unitary executive, what's called the unitary executive. And before anybody starts snoring, it really does delve into this and two other areas where Governor Morrissey has attempted to issue executive orders that contravene a statute on the books. This is a very important question for us to decide. And Admiral Stubblefield is absolutely right about this. The courts are going to have to decide, does the executive have the power to come in and actually issue an executive order that overrides a law on the books? Now, Mike Haidt, you were absolutely right about the tendency of legislatures, not just in West Virginia, but around the country, congressional, to take a let George do it attitude with the chief executive, even in some cases where the executive is from the opposite party and has opposite points of view. It's just, well, I'm just not going to fool myself with let him decide. That's one thing. It's something else when the executive comes in and says, I don't care what the legislature said. I'm issuing the order. And so anyway, this is the process question. We also have a substance question. And while I might disagree with some of you all on the substance here, I think it is more critical for us to first get the process right here. And I believe the courts will come in and say, Governor, you can't do that.
John, I'm glad you brought that up because I wonder, with your years of experience in the legislature and Mike, currently you're a sitting legislature, I wonder about the mentality of the members of the legislature when they take time out of their lives to go down to Charleston and they work hard for 60 days and, if everything's you're working hard up to the very last minute of the session, then you come home exhausted, but hopefully proud of what you've accomplished for the state. And then the governor pulls the rug out from under you. I just wonder what kind of reactions there should be or we should expect there to be from the legislature.
Well, in fairness to this governor, this is a decision he made before we went into the session or during the session when we first got there. And I think with the the bills that we brought forward in the legislature, some people were looking to codify what the executive order was. And that is what did not happen. Now, I guess the argument now is, since the legislature did not codify the executive order, what should happen? Should the executive order stand? Or
of course not.
Should it revert back to what the statute is? Right. So,
Mike, you all in your wisdom said to the governor, no. We passed a law before. We're not changing it. You must obey the law. And the problem is the governor is still attempting to overturn the law.
Is this fundamentally different than the legislature overturning the Constitution and allowing oversight of the Board of Education, which was not allowed? Right? So, I mean, it's kind of...
I disagree with you, John Gilstrap. No, the state Supreme Court about 35, 40 years ago ruled that the legislature does not have oversight over the State Board of Education. Now, I personally do not agree with that substance, with that policy.
Wasn't a bill just passed that grants oversight?
The bill did, but not the Constitution. And in fact, a couple of years ago, there was a proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot that would have given the legislature oversight authority over the State Board of Education, and the voters rejected it.
But John's point, John Gilstrap's point, is right on target, John Doyle, and you're kind of evading it.
I'm not trying to.
Well, but the legislators, by their recent vote statute, in effect says they're taking on the Constitution and they're challenging the Constitution.
They are. That is right. And the courts will decide. The courts will absolutely decide. But I personally think that if they were going to do it this way, a wiser course of action would have been to not put that constitutional amendment out there in the first place and have the voters reject it before they passed a statute going to the court and saying, please, court, rule.
Well, I don't know if you've heard my stance on this, but that proposed constitutional amendment could have been 700 words shorter. I think it was rejected because nobody knew what it was.
Oh, that happens a lot. Oh, I agree with that.
And if it had been standing alone, the only one,
right,
but it was wrapped around three others that were much more controversial.
And listen, when that came up on the floor, it was in my last year in the legislature, I vote and spoke in favor of that constitutional amendment. I do think the legislature should have oversight.
Just like they do with every other agency.
Exactly. That is exactly right. But if you ask the voters, change the Constitution, and the voters say no, now you're kind of stuck in the mud.
It's not undifferent from the executive having an executive order and the legislators saying no.
I do think in each case, you have a body, in the first case, the executive, the second, the legislature, trying to contravene the Constitution.
All right, Joe, last word is yours.
Well, I think there's two levels to this subject that I raised. One is, of course, the matter of public health and the fact that it's, the vaccinations that are required of our children before they attend school are almost universally supported by doctors, medical societies, those who study infectious diseases as a profession for a living, are all behind this. And the shame of it is that West Virginia and the vaccination rates are the program we have for our students in this state is a model for the country. I think we had the best vaccination rates of any population in the country in terms of our students and what's required of them before they attend school. And we're about to potentially upend that if the governor's viewpoint trumps what the legislature did in terms of the requirements for vaccination. So that's the one level. That's the public health level. And the bottom line there is, while you can potentially opt out of vaccinations, you cannot opt out of illness and death. And I'm afraid that the devil's at the doorstep there if we allow this movement to continue. But secondarily, the argument about, as John raised, the unitary executive and the powers that the executive, the powers they're exerting both at the state and federal level, I think, is a matter of important debate going forward. We have a legislature. These folks are closest to the electorate in the state of West Virginia. They stand for election every 2 years, so they have to honor the will of the public in terms of how we deal with matters of public health. And I think they're best equipped to handle these issues. For a governor to come in after the legislature decides we're not going down this path of opt-outs, and for the governor to come in and put his heavy thumb on the State Board of Education and superintendents who run the schools around the state, dictating to them that they shall allow religious exemptions for vaccinations, I think is a direction we should not go in terms of how we manage our affairs. The executive is there to make sure the laws are executed faithfully, not impose laws. And I think we got to get back to that in terms of what the state and frankly, the federal Constitution requires.
We have a couple more minutes here, so before we go to our break, I'd like to say, I don't know if anybody was watching earlier this week, but Mike Hornby was on, and he had a good segment about this, and I think the legislature missed an opportunity when it comes to vaccines, where they didn't codify what the executive did, our governor did, with his order, but we have a problem with the medical exemption part of our vaccinations here in the state of West Virginia, where you have one individual or a couple individuals that make the final decisions on medical exemptions, and they're almost always denied. And there are reasons why certain individuals should be exempted for medical reasons. And we had an opportunity at the legislature to correct that. And just like so many other bills, good pieces of legislation, once they get to the floor, they Christmas tree and a whole bunch of stuff gets thrown into it. And then it just dies because of all the stuff that's been added.
A good idea got lost in the chaff.
But also,
absolutely.
Mike Hornby is making the point to the religious exemption and the medical exemption should have been two separate avenues.
Correct. And that's where I think we got lost, and where the legislature had the opportunity to make a good piece of legislation, and it got lost because of the religious exemptions. We have to get the medical side of the exemptions right, that there are kids out there who should not be getting vaccines. They have had adverse reactions to vaccines, and we can't mandate that they continue to get vaccines. We got to get that portion of it right.
And there's a lot more sympathy, not only with the legislators, but the public as a whole, to address the medical exemption portion, and less so with the religious exemption.
I think this whole thing is a temper tantrum over the forced COVID vaccinations. That
by the people?
That shutting everything down, I think it just angered people, and it's quit telling me what I have to do. I really think that that's what this is based in.
Within a certain group, you're probably right, John, but for other groups, and I would say the larger groups, COVID years are somewhat in the distant past. You don't relate to it now. I think this is a new issue. I think this does not have anything to do with COVID.
And Mike, excellent point about the medical exemptions. That does need to be addressed. We know there are certain immunocompromised individuals, young children, whose bodies will not tolerate getting a live virus injected into them, which some of these vaccines have. And so, yeah, those aspects of the exemptions need to be addressed. And really, we need to have clarity on that, because that's a matter of life and death for some of these folks who suffer from immunocompromised conditions. They just can't handle a vaccine, and they shouldn't be put to the test.
Joe, excellent lead off, and thank you. We've reached the top of the hour. We're going to take a short break before we get back to Eastern Panhandle Talk. Thank you, gentlemen, and you are listening to WRNR Radio and watching TV 10. There we are. Welcome back to Eastern Panhandle Talk. I'm your host for the day, Michael Haidt, the Badger. To my left, the greatest author since J.K. Rowling, John Gilstrap. We also have former delegate John Doyle.
Good morning.
a lawyer extraordinaire on the phone, Joe Ferretti, and with our topic now, the Admiral, Bill Stubblefield.
Mr. Badger and your elite group of folks around the table, there's been two instances in the last 3 or 4 weeks, totally different, but I think either one by themselves could have a real impact on the 2028 presidential election. My question is going to be, after to describe what these two are, as they come together, the nexus to come together, are they going to kind of offset each other, or what's going to emerge? One of the issues is the passage of the big, beautiful bill. For supporters, everybody's happy. But for the voters as a whole, it's underwater by over 20%. 59% oppose it. By Gallup, only 38% support it. President Trump is very much allied with the big, beautiful bill, and his poll numbers have slipped as well. Tariffs and other things, but primarily the big, beautiful bill. He's underwater by the economists by nearly 10%. Nate Silver's Silver Bullet average of 10 polls has approval 45%, disapproval 52%. So these numbers would give the Republicans some cause for concern in the 2028 election. Coupled with that, though, is that the recent election in the primary, or the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City, was a gentleman named Mamdani. He's a 33-year-old state assembly member. He's very much defends the Palestinians as opposed to the Israelis. He's a socialist by heart. He admits he's a socialist. Free buses for everybody, free bus rides for everybody. $30 minimum wage, rent-free, putting working people first, and what is concerned, the national party leaders, the Democratic Party, have for years been trying to put some distance between them and the Bernie Sanders label of socialism. Now, probably the largest city in the U.S., voted overwhelmingly in favor of someone that professes to be a socialist. The national Democratic leaders don't really know how to respond to this. They're not endorsing him. Somewhere down the line, they'll have to take a position. So my question, folks, we have two things: the big, better bill, the big, beautiful bill, which right now is highly unpopular with the majority of the people. And one of the leaders in the Democratic Party is professed socialist, along with Bernie Sanders. What impact, if any, if these two things come together, will have on the future of the Democratic Party and the 2028 election?
Joe.
Well, I find that Mr. Mamdani is the New York City mayoral candidate. I find that a fascinating development for two reasons. One is, and I think you'll see candidates learn the lessons from his campaign. The way he campaigned there's some fresh ideas, there's some novel approaches, and I think you're going to see candidates like Andrew Cuomo, who campaigned in the old-fashioned way. I think you're going to see a lot of changes in terms of how campaigns are conducted based upon the success of Mamdani. Now, the larger issue, and Bill, the one you raised, is, okay, is there a common thread between the recently passed budget bill and the rise of this democratic socialist in New York City politics? And I think there is. And I think the common thread is affordability. This fella in New York City ran on that issue. Rent's too high. Property values are too high. The cost of buying groceries is too high. Mass transit costs to the public, getting on the subway, riding a bus, all that's too high. And he really campaigned on efforts to try to address the cost of living in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And that resonated with a lot of voters. And I think you're going to continue to see that resonate. We saw that in the 2024 election with President Trump running on affordability as an issue and inflation. that was hurting so many families in this country. I don't know that the president has made strides in dealing with affordability. The tariffs, according to most economists, add to costs for the American public. And now with this budget bill and the projections that many Americans are going to lose health coverage as a result, that's also going to raise costs, not only of health coverage, but also the externalities of having a population that doesn't have health insurance. These people still go to the hospital. They still need doctors and nurses to treat them, and it's uncompensated care, which affects the rest of us who pay insurance and who go to the doctors. We have to pay more to cover the people who can't pay at all. So I don't know that the budget bill is going to address affordability the way that the president needs to. So the common thread here is the cost of living. And I suspect that many of us are going to feel the impact of cost of living going forward. That's why Trump's after the Fed chair right now and wants him fired, because he wants interest rates down, because he knows he's not making any progress on cost of living. And so I got to believe that, Bill, that's the common thread here, and I think we're going to see that in our politics for the next cycle or two.
John Doyle.
Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. He claims to be. He may think he is, but he is not, because he says he believes in the market. This guy, Zoran Mamdani, is indeed a socialist. His specific proposals do meet the classic definition of socialism. I think while he might get elected mayor of New York, and I think he only gets elected if Mario Cuomo decides to run, and Cuomo and Adams split the Crook vote in half. I think that's the only way that Mamdani wins in November. But let's say that happens. The plain truth is, other than New York City, Boston, and San Francisco, no one can get elected advocating that government set the price of ketchup. It's just not going to happen. So that, in terms of the national implications, political implications, it is going to be far overridden by the election of two Democrats as governor this fall who are right, moderate, center left, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. That's going to be the overriding signal from the Democratic Party to the country. We are ready to govern.
Bill.
Well, I'm the host.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yes, I'll go. Well, first of all, who says that J.K. Rowling's a better author than I am? I just, you know, it's
Well, I've read you both, and me. Oh, and I love your stuff.
So, some interesting things about this guy Mamdani. More people turned out for the primaries in New York City than in the history of New York City. And they did it overwhelmingly. I mean, Cuomo did not lose by a little. He lost by a lot. So here's the problem. Never in the history of ever has a socialist government worked. It just doesn't. And if we take the largest city in America and give it 4 years of socialist control, maybe we demonstrate that and it's a dead issue forever. I don't know. I can't conceive of how people would vote for this guy. But he is young, he's good looking, and he does TikTok videos. So, you know, what more do you want out of a leader?
These days.
As far as the big, beautiful bill is concerned, the one sitting next to me, but as far as the big, beautiful bill is concerned, I think, and I stole that joke from one of our listeners, it's unpopular now because of the negative drumbeat from the legacy media. It's people are going to, it's all catastrophizing. Oh, it's going to be terrible. People are going to lose their Medicaid benefits. We're going to have, all this negativity. It could be true. You know, we don't know. It's only been a bill for a week or two. So, if in fact people like to have their tips and overtime untaxed, and if they like, the various elements of the bill, the good news is he's got 3.5 years, well, 1.5 years, I guess, before the midterms. There is time for this bill to get traction, one way or the other. If it works well, then he's golden. If it doesn't, then Republicans lose control for decades. But I don't think Mamdani is a threat. He's like a trinket, you know. He's got this message that everything's free. I think young people like young people to be their leaders. We'll see how it works out. I know that the business community is drumming up huge numbers to counter his popularity and to get, I don't know who they're going to get behind. I mean, Eric Adams, it's what did you say?
The crook vote.
The crook vote, yeah. So we'll see. I think it's too early to say that the Big Beautiful Bill is a death knell for the Trump administration. And the Mamdani thing concerns me.
John Doyle?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. I forgot to address the Big Beautiful Bill part of it. I'll do it really, really quickly. And that is this. And I've seen this with Biden's Big Back Better, with the Trump tax cuts in 2017, with the Affordable Care Act. Anytime you pass a huge, comprehensive piece of legislation, you are immediately on your back foot. Because there's an old saw in politics. If you're explaining, you're losing. And when you pass something that big and that complicated, you are in a position where you have a lot of explaining to do. And some of the explanations will resonate positively with the public. Some of them will not.
Well, as it relates to the Big Beautiful Bill and the polls that Bill is citing, I think it's too soon to know. People don't know really what is in this Big Beautiful Bill. All they know is what they are hearing, like John Gilstrap said, from the media and the one they listen to. So if you're listening to a conservative media source, this is a good thing for America. And if you're listening to one of the many liberal sources out there, this is horrible. And I think that's where the polls are going to, based on what people are hearing. Not that anybody has read this bill or knows what's in it. John Gilstrap, you make a great point. With any piece of legislation like this, it's going to take a year or two to really see how this affects our economy. And that's what really drives, in the end, what people think of that piece of legislation. How did it affect our economy for the better or for the worse? As it relates to Mamdani, I think this is a problem for the Democratic Party. I disagree with John Doyle. I think if this guy gets elected, I think there are people within the Democratic Party that thinks it is already moving too far left, and this is just a continuation of that. This could be a real setback for the Democratic Party if this guy gets elected as a self-professed socialist. The people are going to see this on a national level, that the Democratic Party is moving way too far left, and it could set them back even more and more years. Bill?
Mike, you hit the point that I actually was trying to get at. It's fodder for the other side. The Mamdani is going to give great campaign rhetoric for the Republicans. They're going to forget about the election in Virginia and New Jersey, John. That's going to be immaterial. The Republicans going to be hitting very hard upon the candidate for New York City. At the same time, the Democrats, it's going to take a while, but the Democrats are not going to pay any attention to what the polls are 2 years now. They're going to use the Big Beautiful Bill as political fodder campaign against him. So both sides have been given an opportunity for campaign fodder.
And I would agree with you, Bill, if the Democrats had a plan, if they had an alternative other than not this.
Yeah.
You know, and if they had a candidate.
That was the nexus that I was talking about, John, because I think the Democrats at this point in time are floundering. They have the Big Beautiful Bill, I believe, have given the Democrats an opportunity, but I'm not sure they're in a position to take advantage of the opportunity.
Great point. All right, let's move on. And my topic is about ICE. ICE agents continue to be harassed and even recently ambushed by a militant group outside of one of their buildings, where an ICE agent was actually shot. Was not mortal, so thank goodness for that. But is this the question? My question is this a result of the left's call for violence and the violent rhetoric that's coming from them? John Doyle.
The left has not called for violence. I think I understand in some cases why ICE agents would want to have masks. They have homes, they have families. But here's the problem. Some of these people are showing up without even badges. And this leaves it open for someone who's not an ICE agent to impersonate one and show up and try and arrest people. I think if I'm going to be arrested by a police officer, any kind of police officer, I want a badge number and a name on the badge so that I can report if I think I have been abused by that officer. That's, to me, that's fundamental in a democracy.
Joe.
Well, I thought about this issue, and I looked for, what do we currently have in terms of law enforcement requirements? What are they supposed to do if they are in law enforcement and they utilize the power of the state to apprehend, to detain, to arrest? We got a patchwork of state and federal laws on this, but there is no definitive law that says that a law enforcement officer has to identify himself or herself in the execution of their duties. Now, a vast majority of police departments across the country have internal policies and procedures to do exactly that, to have a badge, to have a business card, to have some identification, so that when you do have an encounter with the public, you are able to identify yourself and to establish your authority. This is done for two reasons. One, it's done for accountability, so that the public knows who they are dealing with, and that the people exercising the power of the state are accountable to the public. The second reason that there are internal policies regarding identification is to protect the officers, so that you know who you're dealing with. You know, we are a heavily armed society. If somebody approaches a member of the public and they're masked and they're in plain clothes and they're suddenly, shouting orders and trying to throw you to the ground, I can tell you some people in this country are not going to react well to that. And so for the protection of these ICE agents, you would think that there would be some internal policies about identification. That's why an officer wears a uniform and has a hat and has a badge on their chest, because they have to show that they have the authority so that the public knows who they're dealing with. So I think this is fraught with danger for these ICE agents. I understand they get doxxed and they get threatened. And, welcome to the club. So do federal judges. So do doctors who insist that you get a shot in the arm. This is the way it is in society these days. And if you don't want to put up with that, don't take the job. But the bottom line here is that I would think for the protection of the public and for protection of the officers, some identification would be required.
John Gilstrap.
I agree that badges should be shown, and I believe that the vests need to say police and identify the agency they're with. I do not think that these people should have to show their faces. We make excuses for Antifa people that are masked. We can certainly make excuses for law enforcement who's trying to protect their families by not showing their identity. But I do want to go back to this is a Democrat problem. I think it's triggered. Axios reports after interviewing 24 House Democrats. They're warning that their base has become increasingly radicalized and they don't think that lawmakers are doing enough. Voters are urging them to spill blood. The protesters have to be able to bleed for their cause. Some have suggested, I'm quoting now, some of them have suggested that we really need to be willing to get shot when visiting ICE facilities. The idea, this is an extension, I think, of the theater of the California senator. I can't remember who stormed.
Padilla.
Yeah,
Alex Padilla.
Yeah. Get the vision of me getting manhandled, and we'll blame the Trump administration, and we'll spin up the Democratic base. In these cities, San Francisco comes to mind, and there are others, Portland, I think, Minneapolis, where the mayors are not allowing the other police, the municipal police, to back up ICE agents when ICE agents are actually enforcing the law. It's dangerous to everybody, and you don't see this in Republican-led cities. You see it only in Democratic-led cities. And I think it's a big issue. I think it's a powder keg.
Bill?
Yeah, I think this is a lot of optics. The optics of the ICE now harkens back to a police state, something that we in the U.S. have always been sensitive of. We look at other countries, and we're looking through the history of the European history, especially with police states. And whether or not, again, in our society today, 50% view it one way, 50% view it the other way. John, you make a good point about some of the Democratic leaders, and for 50% of the country, it is a Democratic party, but a Democratic problem, Democratic Party problem. For the other 50%, it harkens back to the fear of a police state. It has not been well handled. I think most on either side. I think doing something with the immigration is needed to be done. I agree with the president with what he's doing. I don't agree with what is being viewed as a overhanded, over-strong-arm attempt to frighten and intimidate and to put having nothing off grounds, going into churches, going into courthouses, going into schools, of having these ICE agents come in, and anyone that gets in the way, they're going to be overwhelmed by brute force. It's not a good picture, and its optics is bad on both sides.
Well, schools and churches, I don't know that there's a whole lot of that going on, but when they are coming, there may be some. But for the most part, I think these individuals are identified by their uniforms. They do say police. They do say ICE on them. So there are very few incidents when they're not identified as law enforcement in some way. Now, as far as going into the courts, I don't have a problem with that at all. If there's an illegal alien that is here and they are in the court system because they have committed a crime, there's nothing wrong with ICE agents showing up at the court and taking control of that individual once the court has had their say with them. This idea that judges are issuing them out the back door so that ICE can't get them, that kind of stuff needs to stop.
Remember last year, or in the last administration, probably 3 or 4 years ago, the kerfuffle over the Border Patrol agents who were whipping Haitians with the reins of their horse, and it was invoking images of slavery and all this. It was absolute hogwash. They were using their reins, but they're using their reins to control their horses. But the optics was wrong, and the fact that the narrative is a lie doesn't stop the left and the right, for that matter, but in this case, it doesn't stop the left from perpetuating the lie in order to drum up their base.
But you say narrative is a lie. For half the country, you're exactly right, John. The other half of the country, you're wrong. That's the problem,
John?
what we have today.
I'm going to push back just a little bit. I read some of those statements that some of those individual Democratic members of Congress said, and I regard them as nonsensical. To regard them as the voice of the Democratic Party, I think, is wrong. I don't look at the nonsensical things that Marjorie Taylor Greene says and say, this is the Republican Party. It's not. These are individual members of Congress speaking their individual opinions. Now, when you hear Mike Johnson say something, I accept that that's the Republicans in Congress. If you heard Hakeem Jeffries say something, okay, fine.
Who specifically refused to condemn the
well, he needs to.
And I will concede that it's not the Democratic Party that is saying this, that is calling for violence, but it is members of the Democratic Party.
And I don't think they're calling. I think they're warning against it. That's not the same thing as calling for violence.
We're up against a hard break right now, and with that, we will be back. You are listening to WRNR Radio and watching TV 10. Welcome back to Eastern Panhandle Talk. I'm your host today, Michael Haidt, and with item number, 4, John Doyle.
Thank you, Mike. As much as I was tempted to tastefully titillate everybody with the Attorney General that the MAGA right is now beginning to call Blondie, I shall resist. Because something happened 3 days ago in Jefferson County that I think must be attended to. The Jefferson County Commission, convening in their regular monthly meeting, had before them the members of the Jefferson County Development Authority. It's a 17-member body, all volunteers appointed to conduct the development business of the county. And some of their terms were expiring. There were other people there. Some of them wanted to be reappointed to their terms. Others showed up, wanted to be appointed. Everybody thought it was going to be sort of an interview to determine who would fill the appointments on the commission. Suddenly and without warning, the commission decided to abolish the body, with the members sitting there in front of them, and said, we are going to reconstitute this 17-member body into a 9-member body, and you're all fired. Now, first of all, the substance, I don't argue that maybe reducing the number from 17 to 9 is a good idea. I had heard some rumors that there were some people that just weren't showing up. It was difficult to get a quorum. I don't know. But for whatever reason, that is a substantive decision that is clearly within the confines of the commission. But that's not the way to do it. I think had they said, you know, folks, we're not going to make any appointments here today. We want to think about reducing the number. So if you could all come back next month, we'll decide how many people we're going to have. You can still all apply, those of you who are on and want to continue, those of you who aren't. That would have been fine. But no, it was, I think, just plain rude what they did to these volunteers. Remember, they're unpaid volunteers. And our county commissioners are paid quite handsomely for the part-time work they do on our behalf. And I don't think they have any business treating volunteers like this, even if it's a volunteer they think, hadn't shown up to enough meetings or whatever it was. So there we go.
John Gilstrap.
Is this the same group, the ones dismantled? Is that the one that would have been involved with the Middleway project and the water plant?
No. No, that would have been the Planning Commission, I believe.
Okay, so what does the Development Authority do? It just
recruits businesses.
Okay.
So they could have been involved up front.
Recruiting.
Could have been, that's right.
Was there a speech given up front that y'all aren't doing your job, so therefore? Or is it just...
I read the story in the Martinsburg Journal by Ainsley Hall, who was there for the whole time. I have talked to people who listened online. I did not hear about it till that evening, till after it happened. It's apparently the only discussion was with the attorney, Nathan Cochran, can we do this? And the attorney said, yes, you can fire everybody summarily. Now, there may have been some discussion of should we do this, but if there was, I don't know.
I certainly they have the right to do it. It is rude. It kind of reflects an ongoing certain dysfunction that goes on with the Jefferson County leadership. I don't really have a comment on it because without knowing the reason why, hopefully over the next week or so we'll have them in here. We'll figure out why. But you're right. It's rude.
Joe Ferretti.
Well, I not only is it rude, it may be illegal. Yeah. And I know Nate Cochran gave the opinion to those on the county commission that they had the authority to do this, that the development authority members serve at the will and pleasure of the county commission. That all may be true. But we also have an Open Government Meetings Act law in West Virginia. It requires elected officials, governing authorities, to publish an agenda and to do so with sufficient notice to the public as to what matters are going to be addressed in a meeting. And that gives the public the ability to be informed and to show up and offer their input regarding what on the agenda and what the elected officials are going to do, and it gives each member of that elected body sufficient notice to what to be prepared to handle or address at the meeting. And I think there could be a real question here. I don't know enough, like John Gilstrap, I don't know enough to comment on this in terms of whether or not there's actual violation here, but I think it's a question that needs to be answered. Was the agenda published in such a way that there was sufficient notice that this kind of action could take place, that all members of that development authority could be summarily dismissed and basically the authority dissolved with discussions about who's going to replace them, if anyone at all, or whether the county commission was going to take the onus now of being also the development authority for the county, which they can do. There's no law that requires a development authority. So I think those are questions that this county commission is going to have to answer going forward. And I suspect that there's going to be some legal action perhaps pursued as to whether or not the Open Government Meetings Act was violated.
It seems to me that the agenda had to be posted, and these individuals were coming for what they thought was to be reappointed.
Or interviewed to be reappointed or appointed.
So
yeah.
it seems to me like they may have
I can answer that.
Opened up the door by this already being on the agenda. And once you have the development authority issue, whether it's appointments or whatever, opened, it's sort of like opening a section of code, then many things can happen. So once it was on the agenda, I think many things could have happened with respect to the development authority. What it comes down to, agreed. Did they have the authority to do what they did? And it seems to me like they may have, and it may be challenged, but they may have. I think that the county commission is an elected body. They are elected by the people because the people want to see their county go in a certain direction. And it's those individuals who are elected by the people who decide whether these agencies that they appoint people to are following the direction that they feel like they should be. It is evident to me by the fact of what they did. They didn't believe the economic development agency, whatever body you want to call it, was going in the direction that this body of county commissioners thought they should be going. And their solution to that was it's overly cumbersome, by one, because there's too many people on it, they're not showing up, and they're not taking things in the direction we want them to. Our solution is to eliminate it, reform it as a non-person body, and appoint the people who we think will take this agency in the direction we feel like it should be going in, as we were elected by the people, therefore the people wanted to go in that direction as well. Bill?
Yeah, on the agenda it said, consider the appointments, membership, and makeup of the development authority.
That covers it.
That, well, yes and no.
Makeup.
Yes and no. I'm very disappointed with the Jefferson County Commission on this particular thing. All of them ran on transparency. That is what every candidate runs on transparency, and they tend to forget about it once they're elected. But Jefferson County Commission has had a long, and I do not think a particular illustrious history of serving the people. There's been a lot of problems. I thought this particular commission had turned the corner. I don't think they have. I think they've reverted back to the old way of doing things. Several things that bothers me on this is they did the massive dissolution of the development authority, getting rid of all the people, with limited discussion. If there was discussion, it was not captured in the reported. Something of this magnitude, you would think, would take place over a period of several meetings. You introduce it, you discuss it. To be transparent, you would have brought the public in with all the facets of it. The fact this was not done, to me, and this is my guess right now, having several county commissioners, is that some deals had been made beforehand. If there had been made beforehand, then it violates the open meeting rule. So that's where it could be illegal. Now, it's inconceivable to me that you do something of this magnitude without getting all parties on board. And how do you do that? You have a discussion. You either discuss it in an open meeting over a period of 2 or 3 meetings, or you do it behind closed doors, violating open policy. Regardless, there was no transparency here. You can question the success of the Development Authority. The Development Authority is designed to bring business in, and they work very closely with the state. Whether they're doing good or not, I don't know. But there is a procedure to change. If you don't like the direction, you replace the members. Berkeley County does that all the time. When someone's time's up, they may be reappointed. A lot of the time, they're not reappointed. And that's the procedure. You don't dismiss everybody, leaving a large gap of question in front of the other voters. I think, if nothing else, the transparency promise has been abandoned by this particular commission.
Bill, I think you make a great point that this seems like there was some decision made before the meeting, and if there is some kind of illegality to this, it could be that if these individuals were meeting behind closed doors before the meeting to make this happen. So if there was a foregone conclusion, that's where the transparency and legality issue would be. John?
I think a good way to have handled this, first of all, I agree with Bill Stubblefield. First, you bring it up and let the public know you're thinking about changing the size of the authority and give the reasons why you're thinking about it. I think also call for a public hearing. Let people in the public come in and weigh in. How do we think this authority should be constituted? And then after that's over, make the decision about the size, and then invite people in, even people who have been on the larger authority, say who would like to be appointed, and we'll decide. It would have been very simple. But yeah, now in terms of this suspicion about skullduggery, ever since that happened, the Twitterverse and the Facebookverse and all of that are blowing up all over Jefferson County. People who are just suspecting that there is something nasty afoot.
Funny, it's kind of a theme of this show is politicians coloring outside the lines.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, one other thing, courtesy. I think this is more of a legal transparency issue than it is a courtesy. But by firing everybody, you're basically saying they have not done their job. We're unhappy with them. A person should have the right or the opportunity to defend themselves.
Not necessarily they're not doing their job. They're not doing it in the way that this current administration wants them to do it. So let's move on. John Gilstrap, you have 45 seconds.
That's more than enough.
All right, I'm going to go back to national politics here. The Federalist is reporting that Barack Obama directed an accelerated intelligence community assessment, an ICA, of Russia's involvement in the 2016 elections. Career staffers who would normally handle such things were completely shut out of the process. The Steele dossier, that salacious bit of fiction that was a dirty trick piece, really, from the Clinton campaign, was made a star of the ICA, despite the objections of career intelligence assets who said that this is not a reliable source, and actually they objected that it's going to undercut the entire report. But John Brennan and James Comey both insisted that it be included, or they wouldn't sign off on it. And Obama insisted that this ICA be released before Trump's inauguration. The effect of this, of course, was to, Russia, and to torpedo the incoming administration. So my question is, just for the sake of time, let's stipulate that the facts are there. If that is what has happened, what should be done? We're hearing from the media and the Democrats that we should all look forward. What's past is past, let it go. Or do we hold these people accountable for really what I consider is an assault on the Constitution?
Bill?
First, this is rising again from a internal CIA report that has not been fully issued now. Brennan did say at a congressional hearing he did not think the dossier should be included. So that's counter to what you're saying. Brennan said he did not think, at least in Congress, he should not. Now, the CIA report is saying that in reality, behind closed doors, he did want it to have it included.
And the FBI has started a criminal investigation for perjury against Brennan for that.
Yeah, but that's at a very early stage. Everything has been alleged. I'm not sure right now the official position. I know the CIA, an informal report that is not. I don't think it's been formally.
But if it happened.
If it happens,
yeah. No, I'm saying
that's why you see Roland is ahead of you.
What should there be a consequence? Is this something that we should just ignore and forget about because it's in the past, or is this something we need to investigate and take action on?
Yeah.
John Doyle.
Certainly, if there are allegations of impropriety, they should be investigated. I don't know anything more about this, John Gilstrap, than you just told me. So I need time to to think about it, to find out about it. Again, I will say, if it turns out somebody broke the law, that person should be held accountable. Period.
Joe.
Well, let me help you out, John Doyle. If we ignore that there was a 2-year investigation by a bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee chaired by Marco Rubio that found, quote, every witness interviewed stated they saw no attempts or pressure to politicize the findings of the ICA. That's a fact. If we ignore the fact that John Durham, the special counsel in the Justice Department of the first Trump administration, was tasked at probing the FBI's role in all of this and came up with one conviction of a very minor FBI employee and 2 acquittals. That was it. For the millions of dollars that John Durham spent, remember how disappointed the Republicans were when the Durham report came out, because his report found that did not dispute the findings that were from the ICA in 2016. And the Steele dossier, which is a central part of this, which is what has bugged Trump ever since it was revealed to him by Comey that it existed. The Steele dossier, again, John Durham concluded had no role in the official findings of the ICA from 2016, even though it was included in the report as an addendum. So the bottom line here, that this has been exhaustively studied. John, I can't accept your premise that we have to accept that all this is factual, that there was game playing by Brennan and Clapper and Comey. They were interviewed exhaustively by Durham. They were interviewed by the Senate Intelligence Committee, and it went nowhere. So this is nothing more than John Ratcliffe, who is now the head of the CIA, wanting to placate his boss and somehow change history. Well, the history's been developed here, and I think we need to move on.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy that, Joe. I think this wasn't decided by these reports, that the Steele dossier was a central piece in them making the decisions that they made during the investigation to begin with. And they cited the Steele dossier as that central piece. And now we know that the Steele dossier was a piece of fiction. The Clinton Foundation or administration or campaign, I believe at the time, got from this particular individual. They've known for a long time that this was false, and still they used it anyway. I think there were crimes committed here by our intelligence agencies. And the problem we have in politics, especially at this level, is nobody ever pays the price for doing these things. And it just leaves the door open for both sides to continue to do these types of things. And these do go against the Constitution. These things hurt our individuals' belief in the system. Somebody needs to go to jail when these types of things happen, and I just don't believe it happens near enough. Gilstrap.
So we ignore the studies that were been exhaustively done over the course of years to do another study, an investigation.
I think the internal work is being done by the CIA now, as well as the internal work that was done in the Secret Service that led to some changes there. Different topic.
Does this fall under Trump's campaign of retribution?
I don't accept the phrase. I think that people do have to be held accountable. What I find really upsetting about this is that the intent of this ICA was to damage the incoming administration. That was the focus, and that was the intent. And that's just wrong. That is not the peaceful transfer of power. That's putting a thumb in the eye of the incoming administration and not the person you wanted to win.
All right, with that, we're going to take our break just before the end of our day.
Sorry, Joe, you can't say anything.
Shut up, Joe.
I'll give you 30 seconds. Joe, go.
Well, I mean, undisputed by Ratcliffe in this latest missive that he published was that the Russians did hack the Democratic emails and publish them. The Russians did run a social media campaign in favor of Trump. That was part of the investigation, too, and that was established.
There we go. All right, you have 8 seconds apiece when we return. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to Eastern Panhandle Talk, and we have 8 seconds apiece. Go, Joe.
My friend Bill Stubblefield, we'll deal with West Virginia's flood preparedness next week.
Sounds good.
And John Doyle.
It was a sad but necessary decision by the Washington Nationals to fire Mike Rizzo and Martinez.
Admiral.
I've enjoyed having the two Johns on today. Good insight. Good verbiage.
John Gilstrap.
How come if I say have a nice day, you'll feel complimented, but if I say enjoy your next 24 hours, you'll feel threatened?
And I would like to thank our producer today, the sports doctor Colin McLaughlin. We'll be back on Monday with Rob Mario, thank goodness, and have a great weekend. It is Talk Radio WRNR and TV 10.
Good job, Badger.
Yes.